1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
Oh, the crack of the bat. That's we gotta throw it in the water this time.
Yeah, now we gotta get some wave sounds.
That's it. We need some ocean breezes.
Yeah.
Detroit City of Champions, the podcast. I'm Jamie Flanagan.
Charles Avison.
That dude wrote a trilogy of books about this amazing year, 1935, and just all the astounding players and coaches and managers and peoples and fans and teams and individuals that did amazing things.
And we're on episode 51.
51,
and
yeah.
we're still, we've got hundreds of episodes. Keep in mind, this is 1 year.
One
year in Detroit sports history. We're on episode 51, and we've got so much more to cover.
We really do. And I'm looking forward to it. And now we're starting to delve into some of the individuals.
Yep.
And we talked about it last episode. Your favorite athlete is Joe Louis.
Yes.
And the favorite story out of the 1935 story
was Garwood.
And that's where we're going next.
I'm so I know I've said this I think I've said it a dozen times already. I'm so excited to talk about this. I guess I'm excited to talk about all the City of Champions stuff,
yeah.
But some just stand out more than others, and I've got a great friend of mine named Chris Gorski, and Detroit GT is his company. If anybody wants to, it's a shirt. He does some of the greatest shirts in the city.
Okay,
but anyways, a little shout out for him. But anyways, I've known him for years, and I've told him about all these different City of Champions stories, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Tigers did this, Lions did that, and he's always like. He would, he's my friend. I'm telling him what I'm doing, the stuff with such and such. And it wasn't until I told him about Garwood,
right, that he gave a crap.
And all of a sudden he goes, you've been telling me about this stuff for like a decade. And it wasn't until the story about Garwood that I was like, this is actually pretty cool. He loved the story of Garwood. And it was like the fact that I was like, how do I reach these people? And it was like the fact that that it was something he'd connect, because he's really into cars and automotive and stuff. And he's like, that was actually really cool. And so, it was, and I'm like, I agree. It's like my favorite story component from it, and so that's what I mean. So people that maybe even just join it, maybe they see it on YouTube just because we're talking about Garwood, because it's really not a subject that gets talked about.
Yeah.
Just like the rest of the City of Champions story, Garwood is people have heard his name. A lot of times when I was doing, when I was doing art shows every week, one of the things that would pop up was that people go, "Oh, I used to party at Garwood's mansion." The mansion. There was a bar too, but there was a mansion, and it went Garwood's mansion.
Is that Kid Rock's place now?
No, the story, as I sort of found out, was that when after Garwood passed, they sold his mansion to it was like a group of Hare Krishnas.
Oh, the Krishna mansion.
The Krishna mansion.
Oh.
And then Krishnas sold it to the Hells Angels or something. And it was a kind of an outlaw party spot all the way through the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And then one crazy party night, it burned down. Yeah, and so there's still relics there from the original mansion.
Oh my gosh!
But that was the story I heard the most. Every time I'd mention Garwood, somebody's like, "Oh, I used to party at that mansion back in the '60s," And so it was I cobbled together a lot of the story just from talking to people that had been there and knew elements of the story. I did read. I think I read an article about it somewhere, but that was the story I'd heard the most. I'm like, well, do you want to know why that guy was so cool and why that mansion was on the river and what it was all about?
Right.
And so now we get a chance to really dive into the guy rather than just that.
Well, and then brought it to modern times with the hydroplane races.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the Gold Cup was the longest running trophy in North America.
Yeah.
It actually, sadly, it had a lapse.
Just
recently, it got interrupted.
Well, COVID ravaged it, but in the last decade, there's. I don't know what I'm not the modern day speedo racing. I'm not that super into it, so I don't know. But from what I understand, is that financing has not been the easiest for them.
Right. But Garwood is what created.
But he's the guy.
The hydroplane Gold Cup in Detroit. If it wasn't for Garwood,
Detroit wouldn't even have
that
any,
wouldn't have existed
not at all. No,
as long as it did.
No, not at all. And we'll talk about the reasons why that is and get into Garwood made Detroit synonymous with speedboat racing.
Right.
I mean, before Garwood, it was all. I mean, it was actually a hotly contested. Every city. There's a lot of cities that were vying to be like the new speedboat capitals. Places where people would race and that they would bring those boat races there. But it was Detroit that won out in purely because of Garwood. And so I don't want to get too far down that road. We want to just like every great story, there's a beginning, there's a genesis to it. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're going to start with today's episode is where it sort of all begins.
Yeah.
And so before even beginning with any components of the story, I want to introduce a book. Okay, and we could do like an entire. This book, it was the complete foundation of everything that I learned about Garwood and everything I learned about this, and it is one of the greatest books that I've read a lot of different history books and a lot of different subjects. Yeah. And this book is one of the best books I've ever read. It doesn't matter about what sport you're talking about. It doesn't matter about what historical subject I've read, like ancient Greece, ancient Rome, whatever. This is one of the finest history books ever written. Okay, and I do not say that lightly. And you ask me walking on the street, you ask me what's the best history books you'll ever read, and one of the top ones I'll mention to you is going to be Speedboat Kings.
Okay. Speedboat
Empire.
And that's J. Lee
Barrett. And we got a slide to bring it up on screen to show we got it. Okay, good. Yep. So I brought my copy in here, and so the J. Lee Barrett, and I'll take it out of this little case here. And there's a reason why it's in a case. I'll mention it here in a second. But so J. Lee Barrett. This book came out in 1939. Okay, so this is a guy who was literally part of all these stories. He's not just writing about it from afar. He was there.
All right.
And in the book, he talks about he was some of these events, and we'll talk about the events he was there for. But this guy, some of the most critical moments of the story, this guy was in the room. He was suggesting ideas that they were actually latching onto.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because he was a major player in all this. So I'm just going to read his little bio on his little biography in the book. So J. Lee Barrett was secretary of the Yachtsman Association of America and had been active in the world of powerboat racing for more than a quarter of a century when he wrote Speedboat Kings. Prominent in other fields as well, Barrett served as the secretary of the Detroit Convention and Tourist Bureau for many years, was one of the founders and president for 2 terms of the Automobile Club of Michigan, helped establish the Southeastern Michigan Tourist Association, and served as the president of the International Association of Tourist Officials. So, so this guy, there's more to it. He actually was, here it is right here. This is a better description real quick. Because he was like the secretary. This guy, he was like the secretary of the speedboat racing committees and everything. So anyway, I don't have it, I guess, right here. But this guy was a major player. He was right in the center of all the action, of all the things that go on. And he quotes himself. He was like, I said this and I said this to Garwood. So this is when you talk about it, and this is one of the reasons why the book is one of my favorites, is because a lot of times when you're looking at history books or history subjects, there's always, the first question is where's the bias? Where's the bias? Like, why is this person writing the book? Is their subject paying them to write a flattering account of them?
Right.
And then how close to the events were they? Were they writing about it 100 years later? Were they writing about it 50 years later? Mm-hmm. How close are they just reading other books that tell them, or other newspaper articles that tell them about the stories? But and that's why I use so many quotes from my books, is because I'm citing actual people that were there at the events, because I wasn't there. I'm a secondary source. But this is a primary source. This is a guy who watched these events, who was there at the events, and that's why this book is so. That's one of the reasons why this book is so special. Mm-hmm. The way that he captures. I'm going to read a quote here. This very first intro of the book. I'm going to read it to you, so you'll get an idea of just how special this book is. But another thing that's so special is the rarity of this book.
Okay,
it is one of the most rare books that you will ever find.
Really?
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
When I
you have it all in a.
When I originally, I've got it in
lead line sealed.
Yeah, when I first
freezer bag.
When I first acquired this book, it cost me, I think it was like $150.
Oh, get out!
Yeah, that was 10 years ago. I got this book for, it was like $150, but there's only 3 of them on the entire internet at the time. I think I got it off eBay for $150, and this is a reproduction from 1980. 1988, I think it was.
Really?
1986. It was reprinted in 86. It originally came out in 1939, and it was reprinted in 1986 by the Historical Society of Michigan. It's one of those. It was so rare that the Historical Society wanted to reproduce the copies of it to allow a few more copies to filter out across the world.
Sure.
But it's exceptionally rare. Okay, and I'm just going to give you a dollar figure because I went on Amazon today to look it up.
Yeah.
Okay, there was 0 copies on eBay. And there was 4 copies on Amazon. Okay, 2 of the copies were actually original 1939 cover copies, but they didn't have the slip covers on them.
Yeah.
And those ones were going for $300 a piece. The copy I have in my hands, I just found this out today, $795 for this book.
Holy
I saw it on there. $795.
There you go.
I'm sitting there, and then the worst thing was when I saw it, I turned around to do something else. I looked at it and I go, "Oh my god!" Like 10 years later, talk about your investments appreciating. And I turned around for a second, and it's something I looked at. I was doing something else, and
I just have my soda sitting on that. I better move it.
Bumped it with my elbow and knocked it onto the floor. I go, "Oh my god!" I go, "That's like dropping an $800 asset on the floor," But I looked at it. $800, and I'm doing a lot of stock market and crypto stuff. And I looked at them like I could trade this in for $800, to get a stock market, stocks and all this. And I looked at it. I took another look at it again, and I go, I'm not selling it.
No.
It's worth more than that to me.
Yeah.
I love this book, and I annotated the hell out of it to write the Garwood section.
Right.
I got so many notes in this thing; it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's like, I was telling a friend of mine today. I was talking to her on the phone, and I said to her, I wonder how much this copy, like if City of Champions, we turn this into a movie.
Yeah.
If we turn the City of Champions into a movie, when we turn this into a movie, and when this thing gets big, is that someday, the Speedboat King's copy of mine with the annotated notes that I used to write the Garwood chapter. I wonder how much this copy will be worth. You know what I mean? Because I used this book to write the City of Champions story. So if a regular copy is online for $7.95, how much is an annotated copy by yours truly who used it to write the City of Champions story? How much is that going to be worth? So, so I don't know, but it's so now all of a sudden it's become. I mean, it was already one of my favorite things, and
it's the Historical Society of Michigan. Is that who redid that?
Historical Society. That's who they reprinted it in 1986. So anyways, I just couldn't believe it. It's $795. I go, oh my god. Talk about appreciation and value. I mean, it's not that necessarily. I don't know if somebody's actually gonna be able to sell it for that much, but when the person who's selling it, there's only 2 copies, on the net. There's 4 total copies and 2 copies of this. I mean, I guess you can charge whatever you want for it if somebody needs it for a project and they need to pay it. So. Anyways, there's one that side of me going, well, maybe I should photocopy it all and then just sell it, but I'm like, nah, it's, or maybe I'll do copies of it and sell it for $50 or something just for the photocopies or something.
Yeah.
But anyways, but it just adds more to just how great the book is that it's $800 to buy a copy of it, So anyways, so it's a tremendous book, and we're going to quote heavily out of it. And so the very first thing, without any further ado, the very first thing I want to do is read the very first thing that J. Lee Barrett says. I mean, there's like a preface a little bit, but the chapter 1, the actual page number is page 17, but it's really page 1 of the actual story he has to tell. Mm-hmm. And so this is gonna kind of give you an idea of where we're going, okay? But I want to warn you in advance. This is a tease, okay? This is a total tease, because when we're done with this quote, we're going to leave off and we're going to talk about the history and everything that leads up to these moments.
Okay.
But by the time we get there, we're going to get back to this, and all these quotes are going to. You're going to be by the time we get to these stories that he's referring to, it's going to be intense. And the listener, the person that's following this show right now, you're going to have a thorough knowledge of Garwood and all the things that led up to it, and you're going to realize you're going to be right back in the saddle of where we're at right now. So this is like this is sort of a tease, and this is how I start out my chapter too. I cite J. Lee Barrett. So again, this is J. Lee Barrett, 1939 book, and this is how he opens up. I can see that vast throng now, as I have seen it before, packed along that stretch of shoreline that hems in the Harmsworth Racing Oval. Almost 500,000 people, tense, silent. It's just about sunset. The Detroit River is as smooth as glass. The black time discs drop one by one from high above the judges' stand at the Detroit Yacht Club. 5 minutes before the starting gun, 5 time discs are poised there. 1 drops each minute. That's what brings the catch in the throat. Those dropping discs. There's nothing for the crowd to cheer here. A vast, awful silence floats over the river. This is drama, possible tragedy. The dropping discs are for those madmen out there in the cockpits of those boats. The drivers, the mechanics. You can see them in the upper course warming up their engines, curving great white arcs in the water as they jockey for position, watching the discs, always those discs. Every second counts. A mistake may mean tragedy, death, because death walks close to these Harmsworth scenes. You can almost feel it as the faint thunder of giant engines drones in your ears. The last disc drops. The crowd knows. Wood knows. He's timing his start to a split second. He's been here before, many times. They don't talk in that cockpit. He and Orland Johnson, his mechanic. No voice could ever be heard against the bedlam of 7,600 horsepower. They use signals. Wood signals to Johnson because Johnson handles the throttles. Wood does the driving, handles the wheel. Suddenly, a signal from Wood. Johnson pulls open the throttle. You can't see him. All you can see is that gleaming brown speck of the Miss America way out there near the upper turn, and the white speck of the English boat in the two twin lines of the wake. But you know something is happening. You know Johnson is pulling those throttles because the engine gear roars louder and louder. The boats are coming now. They grow from dim specks to little blobs, heading straight for the starting line. In another moment, the roar is terrific. Thousands of horsepower is loose. The starter's flag goes down. The last disc drops. The gun cannons the signal, and the boats, throttles open, thunder across the line at over 100 miles an hour and spin into the hairpin turn at the Belle Isle Bridge. You have to be there to know, really, to feel the air charged with drama. This Harmsworth crowd is different. It isn't a sport crowd because the Harmsworth race is not a sporting event anymore. It's more like a duel between modern mechanized giants and with thunderbolts as weapons. Death has walked too close to these Harmsworth events to make it a sports show. The men in the cockpits are riding with death every instant. A stick of wood, a floating bottle, anything could smash through one of those boats at that speed and tear it to pieces. What kind of men are these that go on, defying death? That's how the book starts. Okay,
the bedlam of the motor.
That's the first page.
Oh my gosh,
that's the first page of the book.
And that's Speedboat Kings.
That's Speedboat Kings. $800 is actually kind of a bargain. I mean, inflation's been getting us. It's inflated the price a little bit. But man, that book from start to finish does not get any less interesting.
Okay,
and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah,
this is the subject.
Yeah,
like I say, the tease is like this is where we're going to get to these Harmsworth races. In the death, I mean, there's death. This is dangerous, dangerous stuff. These people are putting the engines as we're going to get to this. What they're building these boats out of. This is the infancy of boating, and they don't know. There's no
jet engines to.
They're literally
planks of wood.
They're literally strapping jet engines to planes of wood, and to increase their speed, they're adding multiple engines to do so, and just strapping them together so like 4 engines becomes 1. Like these things, like this is an incredible story about what we're about to get into. And so that's what I mean. So like that's the tease. That's where we're going. But to get there, we got to lay the foundation of the story.
All right.
And so what so where we're going to begin is with a name that is it might be sort of familiar to some people that have heard that are boating. It's one of the most significant names in all of the history of boat racing, and that is the name is Chris Craft. Mm-hmm. All right, and the name Chris Craft comes from a guy. His full name is Christopher Columbus Smith. Shortened his sort of short name is Chris Smith.
Yeah,
and so so you could say Chris Smith is sort of Chris Smith is just the guy in speedboat racing. Like he is like I guess you could kind of call him the Henry Ford of speedboats. Not in the mass production kind of capacity element, but kind of. I mean, he made a lot. I mean, there's still Chris Craft boats today that are on the St. Clair River. But so Chris Smith, born in 1861. Grew up in Algonac. I was really looking. I've looked everywhere to see where he was born at, but I didn't want to say he was born in Algonac, but he was born in the area because every story of him all the way through his young life all takes place in Algonac.
Okay.
So he's born in 1861 at the outset of the very first year of the Civil War.
We're not going to let facts slow us down, are we?
No, but I'm not going to. But at the same time, I'm not going to give. Well, I'm not going to give incorrect facts. I hate.
I know.
The very first couple episodes of City of Champions, we did so many retractions.
Yeah,
that I was determined never
so,
to do
I mean,
that
you're
again.
like, yeah. So he most likely was born in Algonac,
or thereabouts. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Somewhere in the area. Maybe he was born in Detroit or some. Some of that bigger hospital nearby. But he grew up in Algonac
Yes.
because his early
just
life.
busting your
No, I
chops,
get you.
man.
So his early life, he and his brother were commercial duck hunters.
Okay.
Right. So one of the things
Who gives a duck?
One of the things I have is a map of Algonac.
Yeah.
So much of the story takes place in Algonac. Is for speedboat racing, Algonac is like Graceland. Okay. If anybody has a chance to get to Algonac, it is like one of the, especially in the summer. Algonac, I used to do a lot of art shows there.
Okay, yeah.
Algonac is the coolest place. It's on the St. Clair River, and it's just a special place. They have the Garwood Museum there.
Ooh.
There's a statue of Garwood there.
Right.
It's like they've got a lot of like it's a small museum, but it is like when I went in there the first time I was like, oh my God, like this is the greatest, coolest place. And they just literally on the river of Algonac, it's just these old wood Chris Craft boats driving up and down the river. It's not even a stereotype. These people, that's where Chris Craft, I mean, you go there, it's like a living, breathing museum that these people are driving Chris Craft boats to this day. I mean, these are old, boats from the 1930s to through the 50s that are still on the river today. And it's just so anyway. So that's where we're at right now is Algonac, and this is where Chris Smith is living. And one of the things to kind of point out, I have a map of there on the screen here.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I wanted to show this is that there's when you first drive out to Algonac, one of the things you see is all these like it's kind of like got like a swampy area, and that's what's called the St. Clair Flats. Because the reason is that so you have the St. Clair River, and then you got Lake St. Clair, and so like along the way there's sort of a delta that flows into right near Algonac, and it's sort of it's like a wetlands, it's like there's all these like tall reeds and stuff that stick out, and you see that driving into Algonac. But what it became was an incredible place for ducks. Ducks just loved this area, and so it was like a major spot for duck hunters. And so Chris Smith, early in his life, he and his brother was his commercial duck hunters. That was like an industry out there. It was like helping tourists find, able to shoot ducks and provide the whatever they needed. There's an entire industry around duck hunting out there, and so that's what him and his brother did. And so at the age of 13. One of the things what they did was him and his brother built a boat, and they also were building these wood duck decoys.
Okay.
So they were woodworkers. They were building these. I saw somewhere these duck decoys built by Chris Smith, and they were like super expensive. And I think they might even have one at the Garwood Museum, but they're awesome. I mean, so they were selling these duck decoys. They were building boats for the people out there and like letting them rent them or whatever. When they came out duck hunting.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, So they got to the point where they were so good at making these boats and decoys that they were selling them to all these hunters. Okay, and so fast forward to 1893, Chris Smith is 32 years old.
Yeah,
and these gasoline powered engines were starting to come out to a certain extent. So at one point, Chris installed a gasoline engine into one of these wood boats, and he sold it.
Yep.
And so
there you go.
Yeah, to a group of local fishermen. And so at the time, when he first built that boat in 1893, that boat moved 9 miles per hour. 9 miles an hour, okay? And so that boat that he built, that first boat he built, was the first gasoline powered vessel on the Great Lakes.
Okay.
All right. So this is literally the pioneer element of engines in boats. On the water was right here.
So Chris Craft, it's a Michigan thing.
Totally, 100%. Oh, absolutely.
I did not know that.
Absolutely. And so he's from Algonac and stuff. So, anyways, so fast forward to 1911. So at this point, it's 18 years later. Chris Smith is 50 years old. And a St. Louis and Cincinnati sportsman named Baldy Ryan was vacationing in Algonac and noticed the large number of fishing speedboats on the river. So he's looking around, and there's just like today, where there's all these boats. He's
zipping
looking around,
from here to there.
And he's going, "Holy crap! This is like
you can get some serious fishing in."
Yeah, well, there's all these different boats in the river. And he's like, "Man, this is like 1911. These powerboats are in their infancy, and the whole river's covered with them going." He's like, "Where is these things coming from?" And so he found out about Smith. He bought two of the boats, and he took them to his friend in New York named J. Stewart Blackton, who is the Commodore of the Atlantic Yacht Club in New York. And so Blackton, so so there's a couple of trophies at the time. We're going to get more into the trophies in the next episode, but just so Blackton wanted to win these trophies. He was a sportsman. He wanted to win these trophies. One of them being the Gold Cup, and the other one was the Harmsworth. Okay. So the Gold Cup, in short, was basically the best speedboat racer in America, and the Harmsworth was the best speedboat racer in the world.
Okay,
and so that's just short version. We're going to get much deeper into those in the next episode. So just to give you a little context, the previous year, 1910, there was a racer named Frederick Burnham, and he had won both trophies in a boat called the Dixie 3. And that boat at that time went 35 miles an hour. 35 miles an hour.
Cranking it.
Yeah, so that's 1910, that those trophies are won with boats that go 35 miles an hour. So this kind of brings me to my next little quote, and this again comes out of Speedboat Kings. And so knowing that the idea that the winning boat went 35 miles an hour, Blackton he wants to commission some boats. He sees Baldy Ryan bring these boats and go, man, these are sweet looking. But but if I'm going to get a boat from you, they've got to at least go 40 miles an hour. They have to have a chance of beating the previous thing, because that's what he wants to do, is race them. And so anyway, so this is the quote. This comes out of Speedboat Kings. And so here we go. But Blackton too was a gambler, and he wanted the British International Trophy, meaning the Harmsworth, for his own club, the Atlantic Yacht Club. So he said to Ryan, if you can build me a boat that will travel over 40 miles an hour, I'll buy it. Ryan went back to Algonac. He himself didn't believe they could build a 40-mile-an-hour boat. He told Chris Smith about the deal, and Chris, to Ryan's astonishment, wasn't surprised. You mean you can do it? He asked Chris. Of course we can, Chris said. Why not? We should be able to build a boat that will travel a mile a minute. So 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So Smith started to build a hydroplane, but he soon discovered that things stood in his way. W.H. Faulber, an American living in Nantel, France, owned the hydroplane patent. He began to investigate Faulber's claim and discovered that Faulber's patent extended only to a boat with multiple steps. That's fine, Chris said. I'll build a single-step hydroplane. They started to work. Chris Smith and his sons. They built the first single-step hydroplane in America. The idea behind it was simple. It's a brake, a step on the bottom of the hull, about halfway between the bow and the stern. The step permits the boat to ride on just two short planes, one plane at the step, another at the stern. It reduces the wetted surface, the water friction, thus reducing the resistance. The step really takes the boat out of the water, allows it to skim the surface, thus stepping up the speed 15% or more over the ordinary displacement boat. Before the step was introduced, speedboats ran through the water. They are called displacement boats. But the stepped boats, the hydroplanes, run on top of the water. The hydroplane is the greatest advance in the history of hull construction. Were it not for the step, 140-mile-an-hour boats would not be possible today. That was there's a little intro to the little graphic we have.
Yeah.
I just found a few different components. I listed there was some great.
So if somebody's listening, we really got to break it down for somebody who's just doing.
Yeah.
So
the idea.
Podcast.
So the visual is very, very clear. So I'll kind of walk to the visual.
Yeah.
The graphic that we have on the screen, what it does is it shows a boat that, or on the left, what a boat, like a normal boat. When you think of a boat, the bottom hull of a boat.
Yeah.
It's just
a third of it's in the water.
You have a basic hull design where it kind of like tapers down towards a thinner point down, and the whole boat rides in it. The difference with the hydroplane is the back of the boat. The front half looks just like a regular boat, but the back half is basically flat. It's got a little bit of a taper, but otherwise it's flat. And so what that does is that the boat, when it starts to get up to speed, the front end lifts up out of the water, and the back end just stays. It's flat, so it allows it to just skim the water, and it allows the boat. So what it does is it like he says in this quote. That's why I love this quote right here. Is that basically the boat is just skimming the top of the water.
Yeah.
It's just allowing enough of a connection to the water to stay grounded. But otherwise the boat's just it lifts the weight of the boat off, so there's no friction on the front of the boat.
Yeah.
The water doesn't resist the front. So now you're just going through the air.
You pretty much just have the propellers pushing you through.
Exactly. And just very skimming the thing. And so
that's why they do that flip. Flip.
So the graphics we have are great, because the top left graphic we have, it shows a sort of a black and white schematic of the hydroplane, of the actual the single the single the single plane.
Yeah.
So anyways, and then the bottom one is
Single
actually
step.
the single step, and so the bottom left corner is actually this. I thought that I found this on a toy site, like a vintage toy site, and what it is a replica of Garwood's famous Miss America 10, which we will definitely get into. But it shows the bottom. It's a toy, but what's cool about it is it actually shows it's to scale. It's a toy to scale,
Sure.
and it shows what that single step looks like on Garwood's famous boat. And then on the right is a little graphic that shows a boat as it's picking up speed, raising out of the water, and actually riding on that step.
Yeah.
So it's actually planing. So it's actually hydroplaning.
Yeah.
And so that's what Chris Smith actually or J. Lee Barrett's talking about in this. That's what allowed these boats to start getting speed up was when it's on this hydroplane, and he's the guy that built the first step.
What year was that?
So this was this was 19. What did we say? 11.
Yeah, I thought it was 1911.
Yeah.
And how fast was it going? He wanted to hit 40.
He wanted to hit 40 miles an hour.
Right,
yeah.
right.
So
Henry Ford smoked him on Lake St. Clair.
Henry
Ford hit 91.37 miles per hour in 1904
Okay.
on Lake St. Clair.
Okay, I have not seen that.
Yeah,
but,
although the lake was frozen and it was in a car, so
There you go, Jamie.
he set the land.
I was going to say you're about to blow my entire thesis out of the water here because they're like we're going from 9 to 35 to stretching 42.
He's
you know
at
what I mean?
91 in 1904. So
Yeah,
and
on a
Henry
car.
Ford.
I got you. Okay.
Henry Ford set the land speed record in 1904. He drove it. He had a couple
I heard. Yeah, I did. Now that you mentioned, I have heard that.
They
story,
set
yeah.
one like in 1902, and he had somebody else driving. But then he was like not happy with the drivers and how they were driving the car.
So
He's
he
like,
did,
screw
yeah.
it, I'm going to drive
Yeah.
it. And so Lake St. Clair would like really freeze.
Yeah.
And so that's a nice flat surface, and so they could get rolling.
Yeah.
And so 91.37 mile per hour, and it was very shortly after that broke in Ormond Beach in Florida, and then that's where they just did them forever after that.
Yeah, they started doing the hard beach surfaces. Yeah,
But,
we're going to talk about Lord Seagrave, who broke a land speed record, and then also was one of the competitors on the water too.
I just wanted to mess with you a little bit.
No,
there.
you did, and you caught me for a second there because I'm like, I didn't want to refute something you're reading on the internet. Because if there's something like this, I'm like, hold on a second, that's news to me.
It's on the
'cause
web. It must be true.
Well, I mean, I don't automatically believe it, but if there's some rival story, I was kind of wondering. But I have heard that story
in a car. On the frozen water.
I got you.
It's a little different.
So let's we're talking about here.
You tow a boat behind him. And
Yeah. So that's what we're talking about here. Is we're going to be talking about in the framework of the story.
Yeah.
The story is the gradual evolution of speed on water and the
Right.
things that led to that development to the point where
So we're up to about 40 miles per hour.
So the
plus.
1910, the guy who had won all the Gold Cup and the Harmsworth, the international trophy, was at 35 miles an hour, and then that's when the guy in the quote what he's reading, he's like, that's not possible. 40 miles an hour.
That's crazy.
That's insane. This is like, you got to get, that's like flux capacitor speed, like you're going, what are you trying to go back in time? And
ludicrous speed.
like you're about to see like the streams of light passing in front of your face to get to 40 miles an hour. He's like, you're out of your mind, man. 40 miles an hour is crazy. And it's Chris Smith going, oh, yeah, it's not only that, we get up to 60, and he's going, we go a mile a minute, and he's like, a mile a minute? You're breaking the sound barrier, you're breaking the minute barrier.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at, though. This is early days. It's 1910. And so, so that was one of the big developments was the single plane. And it is, as he says right here, this is the first single plane in America. Mm-hmm. And it's Chris Smith right here in Algonac. But so another one of the things that was another hindrance. These are the two really biggest things that are gonna play a part of this entire story. Is the development of the hull design for the boat. And then the engine design,
right?
Because the other big thing that which is going to come into play, and it kind of talks about what you're talking about with the automobile, is that the engines they were using were engines that they were using for automobiles, and that was and the problem with that is that the automobile cars have the steel frame, and so with a steel framed vehicle can have a heavier engine in it, and it can have more horsepower and stuff. But when you put that in a wooden boat,
right,
it starts to rip the thing and rip the boat apart. It's such a beast of an engine,
right?
So initially and what initially, and also what is going to play out, and it's going to take incredible different directions with the story of the engine design for these boats. But what they originally started to have to do was they had to start every single thing that they could remove from these engines to make them lighter. Like every single piece.
Do we need this? Nope.
Exactly. So they would bore out these pieces of cast iron that were like, that they could, whatever they could get away with removing that was like cast iron to lighten the engine and replace it with brass. Mm-hmm. That's what they were doing, was to lighten these engines up. And so initially, that's some of the things that he does. So that's going to be an ongoing story in the development of these speedboat racing. So anyways. So we're at. Okay. So anyways, so in 1912, Chris Smith makes 3 boats for this guy for Blackton, and so the first boat he made, it was called the Baby Reliance, and it was bought by Blackton for his personal use for $8,500. And then then he also made 2 more boats called the Baby Reliance 2 and the Baby Reliance 3. Yeah. Right? It's I don't know how they figured out the name Baby Reliance, but once he loved that name, he stuck with it for the next 3 boats.
Yeah.
And so the next 2 boats that he bought, these Baby Reliance 2 and 3, they entered these in these 4th of July races in Iowa, and these 2 boats won all 4 races, and they were going 53.7 miles an hour. So not only did he break 40, but he crushed it with 53.7.
Yeah.
So anyways, that's kind of where I want to leave off at the moment.
Okay.
But so what we're seeing here, so this is like a monumental leap from the 35-mile-an-hour boat that he's hoping to get up to 40, and then he's like, no, they crushed it at 53.7.
All right.
So you can see. So this is where Chris Smith is. This is where his career is taking him with this thing. But one of the things, the last little component we notice here with the Baby Reliance and then the 2 and 3, that's going to be an overall theme we're going to see throughout the course of this story. Is once they sort of settle on a boat, it's going to be like the next thing we're going to be talking about is the Miss Detroit. And once they get to Miss Detroit, there's going to be like a Miss Detroit 2, 3, 4, that'll be like Miss America 1, Miss America 2, Miss America 3. So once they sort of settle on a design or a concept, you're going to see that repeatedly. It's going to be the second or the third or the fourth. You see, and that's what's kind of cool is that it kind of keeps continuity with that particular version of the boat or with those designs.
All right. So Garwood, he was born 1880. So he's in his 30s right now while this is going on.
Yeah.
He's not part of the story yet, though.
Not yet.
Okay,
we'll get to him. We're gonna have one more episode. There's some stuff we're gonna talk about in the next episode.
What was Garwood doing in his 30s? Are we gonna find out?
We'll get to. Oh
that?
yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah, we'll get to it. There's a ton of stuff.
And then
But I want to. There's like it's kind of like Joe Louis where we talked about a little bit of the history of boxing first. We did. There's some.
So I'm just seeing where we are. And
Garwood's alive at this point. He's
32.
Garwood's gonna be building up. He's gonna be.
Is he out duck hunting? Is that where he is?
No, he's not duck hunting, but he's building a fort. Let's just say, give a little bit of a teaser.
Who gives a duck? I just was trying to get back to the ducks because Christopher was laughing at me.
Okay, Garwood at this point is basically building up a fortune in order to finance the future endeavors of what's gonna. So you're gonna have a guy like Garwood who is the spirit and soul.
Gatsby money.
Yes, exactly. He's gonna have basically an unbelievable fortune to bring to the table, and he's also gonna bring just a winning spirit. Like all he wants to do is just go faster and faster and faster.
Yeah,
he's gonna be the spiritual driver of the project. He's also gonna be the guy that drives the boat.
Yeah.
And he's going to be partnered. Whereas we're going to find, there's this wonderful story of how this all comes together. But Chris Smith is going to be the original, the designer of the boats, paired with unlimited resources of a guy like Garwood. And that's what I'm saying. It's a match that is just going to be perfect. I mean, this is a guy that's like the greatest boat designer, that there is, paired with a guy with unlimited resources and the desire to utilize them.
Right, so we just cracked 50 miles an hour.
Yeah, so we're at 50.
We're in Iowa. We got to get back on the Michigan waterways and the world waterways.
We'll get there.
And more to cover.
Yeah, so next episode we're going to be talking a little about the trophies, and we're going to be talking more about Chris Smith. And then
I
we're
want
gonna
to find
lead up
out
into
where the
Garwood.
Gold Cup is because I don't know if they're.
It's a tough story. It's when you're reading about it because it's been in Detroit more often than not in the last several decades.
Yeah.
But recently COVID disrupted everything.
Yeah.
And so there was a couple years. I read a Detroit News article that said that it was canceled in 2020.
Yep.
It was canceled in 2021. But even the race in 2021 was like 50-50 going to happen because of the financing.
Right.
Like they'd had I think it was Chevrolet had sponsored a large percentage of it, but they still had not raised enough money to actually finance the race, which cost like $500,000 to put on.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So,
I always love heading down there, though.
Yeah, no,
I was
trying
to, but all right, we'll find out. I'll do a little research on
But
that.
I don't know how much it's even if it even popped up anywhere, or if 2022 is going to be a different story.
Sure.
The other thing too is that there's all this stuff with going on with the borders with Canada and stuff like this. I mean, it's right on the Detroit River, and Canada shares a border with Canada with all this stuff. So all these things are disrupted. So money coming from either side, sponsorship money coming from either side of the border, that's disrupted. So. I don't know, but the thing about one of the things that's I think is critical with this story is that especially if it's brought into a movie format, is it's going to potentially reawaken the interest in speedboat racing.
Yeah.
And in the place that it occupies in Detroit historically. Because when we look at the history of Detroit sports, we look at the Tigers, we look at the Lions, we look at the Red Wings. Now maybe hopefully we look at Joe Louis a little bit more. But really one of the objectives I'm really hoping for out of this is that it raises a little bit more awareness of just what a historical just how much Detroit's speedboat racing history occupies a prominent place, not just in the world of Detroit sort of lore, but in the wider world. I mean, we're going to get, you could hear that quote in the beginning. What's going to make these races so incredible is that there's entire countries are going to be financing boats to try to take these trophies from Garwood.
Yeah.
And so you're going to, like you said, 600,000 people are lined up on the rivers to watch these races. This was some of the greatest, this is where it all happened. It's more than just a Detroit thing. This was the eyes of the international of the world were on Detroit watching these, this story play out. Yeah. And so, it was a big deal. It was a very big deal. And so maybe bringing a little bit more awareness to just how cool it was will sort of maybe drive some interest towards back towards this thing to make sure that the Gold Cup stays in Detroit.
Yeah. All right, so the website?
DetroitCityOfChampions.com.
And then social medias, you can find us there too.
Yeah, anything with Detroit City of Champions. There's not really that much, honestly. I mean, this is something this is a grassroots thing. We're trying to bring it back. We're trying to do this stuff and show this is this incredible season that we're plumbing the depths of something that is just absolutely incredible and has and I'll say it has never been covered.
Yeah,
we could say I'm sure somebody's covered it. It has never been covered. There's small components that every once in a while pop up in a book, just little components, but never in the proper context of the wider world of 1935 and just how incredible this year was, and also how incredible the year was to the establishment of Detroit sports. As far as the bringing all these fans, to the point where the sports, became one of our major identities. Yeah. This is the year. This is where it begins. And so, and you can even say before, we've talked about before 1935, the Tigers, really before 1934, because the Tigers came out of nowhere in 34 with Mickey Cochran, as we talked about. But leading up to 1934, I guess you could say, Detroit sports were non-existent. The Tigers were dreadful. The Tigers were terrible in the late 20s and early 30s. The Lions didn't exist. The NFL had tried 3 times to establish a football team and failed all 3 times. And the Detroit Red Wings had changed their names 3 times in 5 years. Yep. So they were a third-rate hockey organization that nobody cared about. So Detroit sports were non-existent. But it was Garwood during this era. that's who Detroit fans gravitated
And that's why
towards.
you love this story so much.
Well, that's one of the reasons.
Stories.
But he carried Detroit sports through the mid late 20s and early 1930s. Detroit was not a sports town; it was really Garwood town.
Yeah,
and that's where we're going to show.
And we got more coming up. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, tell your friends, share it with your friends, leave it on somebody's doorstep, ring the bell, and tell them to listen and to watch. And we appreciate you being with us. Detroit City of Champions, the podcast, and Splish Splash.
There you
See
go.
you next time.
Work in progress.